All right. If you remember, we were reading an A for Miss Keller yesterday, and we were noticing things in this book that realistic fiction authors might do to make their writing great. And we want to do those same things. And so today we're going to read the rest of this book, and we're going to notice two more things. So when I'm done with this today, you're going to jot down two more things you notice about realistic fiction writers. So the last time we read, if you remember, Patricia had chosen Pop to be her person that she writes about, and he had just told her about Millie, and so we're going to keep reading today and see what happens with her writing assignment this time. And we'll also go all the way to the end to see what happens at the end of this. We can hear the plot is that she really wants to be able to impress Miss Keller, and we can feel that anxiety and that tension. And so we'll want to watch for that turning point, that point where the character kind of changes a little bit. Here we go. I was sure I nailed it this time. I wrote with oodles of heart and feeling. I couldn't wait for Miss Keller to use this essay. But when she handed it back, there was a C scrawled at the bottom again. What did she want from me anyway? She kept me after school that day. Miss Barber, your paper on your neighbor's Millie was, well, adequate. But where are the words that truly show emotion? Then she turned and looked right at me. The reader needs to feel what you feel, Miss Barber, but not in an ordinary way. Be daring, unexpected, surprising, original. Now she gazed deeply into my eyes. You have the words, Patricia. You have to give them wings. That day I found Pop out in his backyard, feeding his koi fish in the pond. Pop could see I was upset. I told him everything, that the boys in class were still calling me teacher's pet, even though Miss Keller was harder on me than anyone. That today she'd said I lacked emotional connection in my writing. My guess is old Killer Keller has taken a real interest in you, or she would have just let you sit there like a bump on a log. As for the teasing, do you know what my first name is? It's Lynn. The guys in my class loved that, and I was the only boy in the cooking class, too. They never let me live that down either. The two of us laughed so hard we could hardly catch our breath. I had noticed before that Pop sometimes took pills. He said they were to keep his ticker going. I knew that meant his heart. Today, I noticed he slipped two pills under his tongue. Days with Miss Keller seemed to fly by, none of them easy for me. Then one day, she called us together. Today, I am assigning you the dreaded term essay. I'd heard about it all right. I have taught you many forms of writing, dialogue and scene, opinion essay, personal narrative. Choose one of these for your last big assignment, and choose well. The grade I give you may well determine if you pass. I was already sweating. To make things worse, she asked me to stay after for a little chat. Patricia, she said, I hope you choose a personal narrative because, quite frankly, your writing still lacks emotional connection with the reader. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up with a subject for my term essay emotional enough for Miss Keller. The last Sunday before my deadline to hand in the topic, all of us kids, Stuart, Winnie, Chantel, were at Pop's baking cookies for a block party to help raise money for Miss Shutter across the street. She had fallen down her back stairs and broken bones. As we were rolling the cookies out, Stuart asked me how I liked Miss Keller. I told him that no matter what I did, no matter what I wrote, it didn't seem to please her. To top it all off, I said, tomorrow our topic is due for the term essay, and I don't have one. That reminds me, I told you that I'd tell you a story about Miss Keller, Pop said thoughtfully, as he rolled out a ball of cookie dough. All of you kids know she is one tough teacher, but not too long ago, she came across one of the most talented writers she'd seen. She picked apart everything he wrote, had him do it over and over until he got it right. Truth is, he'd never worked so hard for a teacher in his life. So what happened to that kid, Pop? Stuart asked. Well, he became a writer, went to work for the biggest newspaper in Chicago, then to the biggest paper in Washington, D.C. He covered stories from South America to the Middle East to Soviet Russia. Once he won a Pulitzer Prize for reporting. He probably would have gone on to do that anyway, Miss Keller or not. Not really, Tricia. This boy's family could never have afforded to send him to college. Miss Keller not only taught him how to write, she raised money for his tuition and fees and personally saw to it that he attended journalism school. Otherwise, he might have ended up working in his father's bakery, Pop said with a glint in his eye. That's right. That kid was my very own son. And I, for one, am grateful that dogged, high-spirited woman, Killer Keller, without her, well, who knows? He slipped another pill under his tongue. Not a week later, still with no essay topic, I'd come early to Miss Keller's class when the office secretary came in and gave a note to her. Miss Barber, Miss Keller said, we need to go to the office. She looked shocked and sad. When we got to the office, my mother was there. I could see she had been crying. She told me Pop had passed away that morning, a sudden heart attack. As we pulled into our garage, I saw Pop's sons. They looked so heartbroken. All I wanted was to go through his house one last time. His sons invited me over. I walked through every room, touched his pillow on his bed, ran my hand across the back of his favorite chair, held his bakery coat that he wore when we helped him bake cookies. I couldn't stop crying. The sky wasn't happy anymore. How could the earth still be turning when someone like Pop had left it? That night, I sat at my desk and started writing. I wrote and wrote and wrote. It seemed like the whole neighborhood was at Pop's funeral, even Miss Keller, and the shops on College Avenue closed for the day. Everything looked different somehow. My sadness hurt everywhere. Long after it was due, I placed the piece I had written the day Pop died on Miss Keller's desk. I didn't really care anymore whether I impressed her or not. All that mattered was how I felt about him. A few days later, I got a pink slip from Miss Keller to come and see her. My heart almost stopped. Anyone who got a pink slip was about to get real bad news because it was the end of the term. She must have hated my essay. I started sobbing. First Pop, now this. I didn't even know if I would pass. But when I walked into her room, she actually took both my hands. Patricia, dear, I am so sorry for your loss, she said. Then I saw my essay folded in half on her desk. I have graded your essay, she began. I don't want you to unfold it until you are home. Do you understand? I shook my head yes. Then she did something that startled me. She hugged me. She actually hugged me. Then she whispered, Patricia, you wrote a stunning tribute to Pop, the crowning example of a personal narrative. My heart sang as I ran all the way home with my essay still folded in my hand. As I climbed the hill, I stopped and looked up at Pop's house for a moment. You're with Millie now, Pop, I whispered. That thought made me warm inside. Then I opened my folded paper, there written in red across the top of the cover sheet. Patricia, your spelling still leaves much to be desired. However, you've given your words wings. I am departing from my custom. Here is your A. My heart warms whenever I think of Miss Keller. She later told me that she was impressed with how I used Pop's very own thesaurus to write my papers. I remember his notes were in the margins in his own handwriting. When I read them, it seemed to bring me closer to him. Certainly, I did use the word love. However, I used every form of it. To this day, when I think of Pop and Miss Keller, my thoughts soar, for I shall always regard them as beloved. And that is how this wonderful book ends. So, hey, back to our noticing sheet. If you remember, yesterday we noticed how it goes in sequence. Boy, today I noticed a lot of things. I noticed how, of course, it continued to go in sequence. I still love the details that this author uses as she brings the story to life. The way that she described Killer Keller and the way that she described things in this book, I loved those vivid details. I also love the way she showed emotion in this book. And so when Trisha found out that Pop had died, the way she brought that part to life and helped us to really understand the sadness there. She didn't say she was sad. She showed us. As we pulled into our garage, I saw Pop's son. They looked so heartbroken. All I wanted was to go through the house one last time. His sons invited me over. I walked through every room, touched his pillow on his bed, ran my hand across the back of his favorite chair, held his bakery coat that he wore when we helped him make cookies. I couldn't stop crying. The way that she describes what's happening here shows us the sadness that Trisha felt. I love the way this author showed emotion, and I'm going to try to do that in my writing too. I'm going to try to use details that show the emotion instead of just coming out and saying she's sad. I also noticed that they use dialogue here. The way that, for example, the way that they were talking to each other when Pop and Trisha were talking to each other here, it really shows the relationship. It shows the relationship that Trisha and Pop have. I also noticed that the author had a reflective ending that was about the plot. And so at the end of this book, Trisha, of course, gets her A. Finally, the problem has been solved. There's a solution to her writing. And then she ends it by saying, certainly I did use the word love. However, I used every form of it. To this day, when I think of Pop and Miss Keller, my thoughts soar, for I shall always regard them as beloved. She had this reflective ending about her feelings for Miss Keller and Pop at the very end, and I loved that too. So there's so much that I'm noticing here. I'm noticing that she gave vivid details that brought the story to life. I'm noticing that she described emotion here that helped us to really understand how the characters were feeling. I noticed that she used dialogue to help us to understand the relationship of characters and to know what's going on. I noticed that she had an ending where the problem was solved and there was a reflection about Patricia's feelings on Mrs. Keller and Pop. And I also noticed there was a turning point. Did you hear the turning point? When Patricia didn't care anymore. When she turned her essay in and it said, long after it was due, I placed the piece I had written the day Pop died on Miss Keller's desk. I didn't really care anymore whether I impressed her or not. And so this is that changing point there. She had cared the entire book. But once Pop died, this big that was the climax of the story, Pop dying, and she had this new perspective. Her impressing Miss Keller was no longer the most important thing there. And so all of those things I noticed, I'm going to write one of them down on the back of my sheet, and yours is in your Google Classroom for you to write down. I want you to come up with 2 today. You may use one of mine and then one more. So I'm going to say reflective ending. And today, my example from the book is Trisha got an A and then shared how much she loved Pop and Miss Keller. I'd like for you to write down 2 as well, and feel free to use mine if you would like to. I'll see you guys on Monday. Well, I'll see you guys later today, but writing will be